One of the most common dreams I have is this. I'm supposed to be speaking at a church, and usually it's the church that I grew up at in Indiana. And when it's my time to get up there to speak, I can't find my sermon notes. And I tell Jim, who's the one that usually leads song leading, to just lead another song. And I look for those notes in the building and the classrooms down this side of the building, out in the van, and maybe even I drive down the street to my parents' house. They lead one song, two, three, maybe four. And usually I wake up. But if I don't, it's that they have a singing service that day. And I get the embarrassment of admitting I can't find my notes. Now, dreams of being unprepared are common for people who are public speakers, and that might be why I have two copies of my sermons wherever I go. And it makes sense. Dreams are connected to what's going on in a person's life. Dreams are subconscious manifestations of anxieties, fears, and desires. The most common dreams are about falling, being chased, or losing your teeth, or being unprepared. And most of these are reasonably believable and, for that matter, reasonably explainable. But others not so much, and people pay psychologists, psychiatrists, and psychics big bucks to help them understand their dreams. But this is nothing new. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had an entire cabinet position dedicated to dream interpretation. So he had Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, and then Secretary of Dreams. And with all this in mind, let's read about Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 13. Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you're trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." This made the king angry and furious, and he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and the men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. The ancients believed that the gods communicated through dreams. Israel even believed that God communicated through dreams, but there were some differences. In Israel, God took the initiative to communicate, and he made sure the people understood his revelation. If there were dreams, then there were also angelic messengers or human prophets to explain those dreams. The pagans believed that the gods inspired dreams, but it was up to them as people to figure out what those dreams meant. So they relied on magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologists to try to figure out what those gods were up to. These professionals looked to meanings in animal entrails and to cosmic phenomena. So when Nebuchadnezzar keeps having one particular dream, it spooks him, and he wants to know what it means, so he calls on those professionals. Now, there's a certain protocol that's to be followed for this sort of thing. The king reports his dream to the professionals consult their commentaries, and the first professional to bring back a reasonable explanation is rewarded. And this is known as a court contest. Well, for some reason, in this particular instance, Nebuchadnezzar violates the protocol. He says, "First, you tell me what I dreamed, and then you tell me what it means." Now, nobody knows why he does it this way. Maybe he's cranky because he's not getting enough sleep. Or maybe he's forgotten the dream, because that happens to me all the time. I know that there's times I'm awakened by a dream, and then I roll over and go right back to sleep, and I don't give it a second thought, whatever it was a dream. Or maybe he's just testing these wise men to see if they actually know what they're doing. Because anybody can consult the commentaries and concoct some sort of interpretation, but it would take a person who is truly in touch with the gods to recount both the dream and then its meaning. Well, I don't know for sure what the king is thinking, but I do know this. His wise men and his gods are about to be exposed as frauds. You've seen it happen similarly with politicians and pundits. When they're pressed hard on something, they don't want to answer, but then when they get pressed hard enough, they finally say that quiet part out loud. Well, these guys here in Daniel chapter 2, they say the quiet part out loud. Consider what is said there in verse 10 and verse 11 of Daniel 2. They say, "There's no one on earth who can do what the king asks. What the king asks is too difficult. Only a God could do that, and gods don't live here." What an admission. It's no wonder the king reacts so badly. There's one thing that these guys are on the payroll for, and they're saying, "We can't do it." And he's got to wonder, what else have they lied to me about? So he gives the decree to do away with the wise men. Now, Daniel and his 3 friends are among these wise men here in Babylon. And likely they're not in the king's court at this moment, because maybe they haven't completed their training yet in the Babylonian arts. Nevertheless, they too are set to be executed with the rest of the wise men. Let's read there again in Daniel 2, verse 14. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. So we have this chief executioner, and he comes for Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and with tact. Daniel is the ultimate wise man, but this wisdom isn't gained from reading chicken livers. It's a different kind of wisdom altogether that comes from a different kind of source. And Daniel just happens to know the source. So he buys time from the chief executioner, and then he begs for mercy from the God of heaven. And let's continue our reading in Daniel 2, verse 15. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" And Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. And so he asked for more time and is granted that. And let's see what Daniel does in that meantime. Daniel 2:17. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in the darkness, and light dwells within him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. you have made known to us the dream of the king. Do you understand what is happening here? What starts out as a contest between Nebuchadnezzar's charlatans and jesters quickly becomes a contest between gods and kings. And there's no contest at all, because nothing is too difficult for Daniel's God, and nothing is unknown to Daniel's God. He makes fools of wise men, and he exposes the impotence of idols. He makes and breaks kings and kingdoms at his pleasure. He is in complete control. When Nebuchadnezzar asks Daniel if he really can interpret the dream, Daniel says he can, but he insists that it has nothing to do with the degree from Babylon University. Look at verse 27 and 28. Daniel 2:27. Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the vision that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these." And to me, as far as looking at this and thinking about this passage, these are humbling words, because I can remember a time when, I was probably about the age of Daniel in Daniel chapter 1, 13 or 14 years old, and likely being able to outscore my dad on academic tests of various kinds. But as Grandma would say, in a very humbling way, there is a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And it's that godly wisdom that has helped our forefathers in the faith endure, and it's that same sort of wisdom that is going to help our young people endure. Now, Daniel does not miss this opportunity to testify to the true source of all wisdom and all power. And let's read about that next in Daniel 2:29 and 30. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, and so that you may understand what went through your mind. And the thoughts going through the king's mind are terrifying, because he's only recently ascended to the throne in Babylon. When he finished off the Assyrian Empire in Carchemish in 605 BC. And you would think, he's confident in his place and secure in his power, but it's just not so. His mind is full of doubts and fears, and his dreams betray his insecurities. And whether it's a big, macho, handsome man or a popular and powerful and pretty woman, never let the job title fool you. Some of the most powerful people are the most insecure people that you'll ever meet. And I think it's worth saying again, in case it just went right in one ear and out the other. Some of the most powerful people you'll ever meet are some of the most insecure people in the world. The dream and its interpretation usually occupy our thoughts when we study this chapter. The king dreams of a statue that is enormous and awesome. As statues like this are common in the ancient world, a royal statue erected for propaganda. And it's likely the inspiration for that statue that we'll read about next week in Daniel chapter 3. Now, this statue had a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, and belly and thighs of bronze, and legs of iron, and feet and toes of iron and clay. But as Nebuchadnezzar looks on, something fantastic happens. And we'll read about that in Daniel 2, verses 34 through 45. While you were watching, a rock was cut, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the king of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. And in your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the fields and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third one of bronze will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and the toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. This dream is true, and its interpretation trustworthy. Now, there is endless scholarly speculation as to the identity of these kings and kingdoms. And the main explanation that I've heard over the years is that they represent, first of all, Babylon, secondly, the Medo-Persian Empire, thirdly, the Greeks, and then fourth, the Roman Empire. And personally, that's the interpretation that I follow as well. As you think about world powers and how they go, the Babylonians gave way to the Persians, and they gave way to the Greeks, who gave way to the Romans. And in the days of the Roman kings, as Luke is quick to point out there in Luke 2 and verse 1, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree. And then he goes on to state Christ's birth. And then Luke 3 and verse 1, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. And this is in reference to who was the Roman emperor when Jesus began his public ministry. So in the days of the Roman kings, God sent his son to announce and to establish his eternal kingdom. And where are the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans? Well, as those philosophers from the great state of Kansas sang, dust in the wind. All they are is dust in the wind. The kingdom of God, however, is still alive and well. For instance, in thinking about this, there are some who listened to me preach and they were alive when Hitler was in power. And if you think about Hitler, he definitely posed a great threat to this world. But he too became dust in the wind, and the church remained. The same can be said today of whatever earthly empire you or I may list. Russia, China, the United Kingdom, the United States of America. They will all be dust in the wind, and God's kingdom will endure. Now the king responds surprisingly well to the revelation that his days are numbered and his kingdom will surely come to an end. He sacrifices to the God of gods and the Lord of lords and King of kings, and he even promotes Daniel and his three friends in the Babylonian bureaucracy. In the end, the court contest proves to be no contest at all, because there is no God as wise, there is no king as powerful, and there is no kingdom as eternal as the one to whom Daniel and his friends belong. And this is the message of great comfort to exiles both back then in Daniel's time and both now for you and I today. The God of heaven is in complete control of the kingdoms of men. And contrary to the conventional wisdom of wise men today, we know that God does live here. He is the God of heaven, yes, but the transcendent God is also the immanent God. He is where his people are, from Jerusalem to Babylon, from the fiery furnace to the lion's den, from the cradle to the grave, and everywhere in between and beyond. So often we get hung up on the particulars of, well, what does this represent? Or what does that mean? How will it all go down? And to be honest with you, I would like to know more about these details. But that's not really the point of Daniel chapter 2. The point of the story is that evil empires come and evil empires go, but only God's empire, only God's kingdom is eternal. So while you're living here in exile, don't be duped by conventional wisdom. Seek God's wisdom and live by his ways. Don't be deluded by the politicians and by their power. If they'll tell you what you need to survive is their power, but only God has the power by which you can survive. Don't be deceived by those who claim to have control over you and threaten you. There is only one with all wisdom and power, and the one who changes times and seasons, who sets up kings and deposes them, and who has brought you into the mystery of his will. As you think about this, it's not close. It's not even close. It's not a contest at all. God wins. So trust in him. Now, I don't know what dreams are keeping you awake at night. I don't know what anxieties or fears or desires occupy your thoughts. But I do know that there is only one omniscient, omnipotent, and sovereign God who can give you the peace that passes all understanding, even in the midst of this exile. Give your thoughts to him. Give your dreams to him. Dream your dreams of him. Pledge your allegiance to him. Bow your knee to him. Because all other gods and all other kingdoms are perishing. Only him is king, and his kingdom are eternal. And there is no contest. And if you're ready to confess Jesus as the Christ and put him on in baptism, I sure hope that you'll do so today. And if you have already made that commitment to Christ, but you need to renew your allegiance to him, you need to repent from going back to the ways of the world and renew your commitment to him, I hope that you will respond in that way as well. If there's any way I can be of help and encouragement to you, I hope you'll reach out to me through this. I thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you have a great day.